Welcome again to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host, Shawn Francis. I'm Brian Altunian, and this is part two of our conversation about the governmental impact of recent legislative acts that have an impact on our community. We're excited to continue the conversation. Hopefully it's important, informational, and valuable to you as well. If you think that it is, share it with people that you know. Feel free to send us notes, comments, anything. There's an open forum for us to have these conversations, and hopefully we do that respectfully. So without further ado, gonna play the theme, and then we're gonna jump into another the extension of our conversation here on Just Two Dads. Hello there, I'm Brian Altunian along with Shawn Francis. Another episode of Just Two Dads. This is an extension of the conversation we were having earlier about the governmental impact of current legislative acts on our community. And as is normal when it comes to talking about these complex issues, our focus was let's get to one subject, and then I think we got to that subject at like the very last few minutes of part one because it's so
very
broad.
Layered.
So yes, so broad.
When we last spoke, I mentioned a vigil that is taking place tomorrow. We are recording this on the 22nd. It will be available. The episode will be published and will drop tomorrow on the 23rd. And that is the first day of the vigil that is being held that I shared earlier. If you want to go to the website, which is MedicaidVigil.com, that is protectmedicaidvigil.com. It is on the screen. Then you can actually register at that point, and I am going to share the screen in a moment so that you can see exactly what the page actually looks like as well. It is an important event that is taking place. As Brian mentioned, people are going to do one of two things: either say nothing at all and just kind of, well, that's the way it is, or take advantage of the opportunity to speak up and speak out and try to make a difference. So it is in one day, 7 hours, 2 minutes, 47 seconds, and counting. So the intention is to hold Congress accountable for the disastrous Medicaid cuts. They said we'll get over it. We won't, right? That's the whole idea. If you look on the screen, you'll see exactly what it is. There's the form there where you can fill it all out, and the information is also going to be sent to your local representative. It's an opportunity to do that. The what consists of it's a 60-hour vigil on the National Mall in honor of the 60th anniversary of Medicaid and Medicare. And so we're talking about 60 hours straight from July 23rd at 9 p.m. until 9 a.m. Eastern time on the 26th. People are going to be sharing their stories as well. Anything that gives us an opportunity to remind us that we are not alone is something that is invaluable, and what the human story is all about. You see the partners that are involved in taking part. Voices need to be heard. So I suggest you take advantage of it. I plan to.
Awesome. Okay. So let's jump into that. So since you had a conversation with your Caring Across Generations group, your network group, talk about some of the things that that you are concerned about from those conversations as far as the recent cuts. And again, we're talking about cuts in Medicaid, Medicare, the support organization, the support financing agency that where money is earmarked for families with disabilities. So talk about those kinds of things.
What it's done is it's made me
about it as you do. So you know much more than I do. So I'm gonna let you ramble.
What it's done is I know more about it than you, but I know what I know, and being curious about what I don't know, especially as it affects others. Again, that takes work. We have to, from a meditative and intentional standpoint, each day stop and think about your fellow human being. We're designed, and I'm not a scientist, but we're designed through creation to survive, right? So if you go back to, our time as cavemen, so to speak, you hunt and kill in order to survive. So our first instinct, unfortunately, is kind of what's in it for me. And I think I'm more empathetic than most people, but even that being the case, I have to stop and think of some of these things. And that's why I'm thankful for the opportunity that I have with carrying across generations, because I'm hearing stories from people that are affected in ways that don't necessarily affect me. So if you're not careful, you can be like, well, I'm good. That's not going to affect me at all. And
Shawn, let me just say this. So
yeah.
you're going to share some of this. I'm not going to challenge you. I'm just going to say, I'm going to ask questions just based on what I would want to know in a lot of this.
Right.
So I don't want you to, I'm not challenging. I really come from a place of I don't know. So I'm anxious.
No, that's okay.
Here.
And I have no problem stating that which I don't know either. I made the comment earlier about not being an expert. We should stay thirsty and hungry. So what I'm concerned about is the people that, let's say people that are not in California. Again, we're here in California. Our state provides a ton of benefits. So it takes another layer of empathy to think about people in, let me back up. Think about it in layers. If you're in metropolitan, Los Angeles, there's access to even more things. If you're in a little bit more of a rural area within the state, you probably have to go a little bit more of a distance. If you're outside of the state, despite the fact that people have left the state in high numbers over the past couple of years, there's still people that come here for benefits that they have access to that they don't in other states. So my concern is for people, and look, when we get into who the bill benefits, the most valuable thing on the planet is people, time, and money, and the last two are important because of the first one, right? So making more money, especially if you're able to do so, providing a service and adding value to other people, we're all about that. But the bill affects those that have less of it, right? And so that's who I'm concerned about. People that have less dollars and less resources as well. We're blessed, so the worry is not right in front of you. But I believe it's credited to Abraham Lincoln. I'm not sure injustice to a man anywhere is injustice to men everywhere. So people in rural states, as I mentioned one before, where there's these care deserts where there is 50 to 100-mile gaps in between access to care. Those are things that exist and have limitations to begin with. These cuts are going to eliminate some of those things. And from what I understand, while I don't have addresses, there are clinics and facilities that have already closed. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned that the squeeze has already begun. And that is why the vigil is important, because, if for those that aren't affected, another reason to attend the vigil is because you get to hear the stories of people that don't affect you today. There's a song by the OJ's called "We're All in This Thing Together," and one of the lyrics is, "Just because you live high on a hill and I live down here on the ground, all the things that are going on that's affecting me indirectly affects you, whether you know it or not." And that is just a fact of life. And I think that I am myself, as much as I do know, I'm going to continue to learn and make it my business to learn about how people are affected in ways that are outside of myself. So you can imagine the myriad of ways that people are affected if you have now in place these stringent requirements, or you have to work a certain amount of hours and then have to make even more of a choice between working a regular job and caring for a loved one. Those are the people that are impacted tremendously. And those are the people that I'm concerned about. I won't say that I'm not concerned about my family. We didn't collect, for instance, in-home health services. We're new to that. We're also new to the Social Security disability benefits as a result of my son, because those things are based on income and things like that. But the other thing it does is being new to that, we're like, well, how does that affect us? I'm a little more worried for people outside of my immediate circle. And then again, there are people that are closer to me. They may be affected in ways that I'm very sure are affected in ways that I don't know, because not everybody's open about exactly what their situation is. So as much as I know, I have just as high, if not higher, an amount of curiosity too.
So let me ask you this, because I haven't seen reports of of clinics and hospitals closing. I've seen reports of potential closing based on these cuts, but I haven't seen anything that says they've actually closed. Do you have anything that shows that these things
No,
this goes back to the stuff that we've talked about before, right?
right.
It's important to stand for, we don't want these things to happen because we don't want these things to close. And I will say this, and I think that makes sense. But if you look at the medical system in this country, while it's better than many, leaves a lot to be desired. So if hospitals are dependent, and clinics and centers are dependent on Medicaid for funding, don't they also get some of their income from insurance and health insurance and that type of thing? Because I think if you look at where reform needs to happen, there should be some reform at the health insurance level as well, right? Health insurance companies are, record profits, as we saw last year with the slaying of that CEO of the United Health. People are frustrated with the fact that the healthcare system is imbalanced as well. So it's almost like, I hear what you're saying, and I know that those clinics and support areas rely on Medicaid for some of their funding. Are there other ways that those can still be supported to provide the services that don't rely on Medicaid? And I don't know the answer to the question, but again, it's that fine line between they've closed and they're in danger of closing if something happens in the future.
Well, I'm actually, again, we're not plugging it. We're not getting paid to do so, but I'm actually going to ask Manus right now and take a look, because I heard it was stated on the call that I was on the other day with Kieran Across Generations that the words that were said were, we've already begun to feel the squeeze. We've already begun to feel the effects. And I think that I'm not clear as to whether or not that's limited to simply programs being minimized or actually being facilities being closed. So I'm gonna enter that now and just take a quick look.
Yeah, so I will say from what I've seen, the general answer is, there are reports of care facilities, particularly rural hospitals and nursing homes, potentially closing or reducing services due to recent Medicaid cuts or anticipated future cuts. Those facilities are often heavily reliant on Medicaid funding, and even small cuts can have significant financial impacts. But I will say this, even before the cuts to Medicaid, hospitals, nursing facilities have all been under financial duress. Their hospital closings have occurred over the last 15, 20 years because of financial distress without this. You know what I'm saying? So, and again, it's not personal. I'm not challenging you at all. Just the discussion around this. Those things have been those facilities have been threatened before the Medicaid cuts have been proposed. So, what's the anticipated? And just for anybody watching on the screen, it's very small type. So, can you see what it says there, Shawn? Or read what it says.
What it says out. I said, is there a report on healthcare facilities that have closed due to Donald Trump's bill? And it says, while it's difficult to directly attribute healthcare facility closures to a single piece of legislation, there are strong indications that policies enacted during the Trump administration have contributed to financial strain on hospitals, particularly in rural areas. And then it says the recent bill, dubbed One Big Beautiful Bill, signed into law on July 4th, is expected to have a significant impact. The legislation is projected to slash Medicaid spending by an estimated $1.2 trillion to offset tax cuts. So when it goes into the breakdown of the situation, again, the source being in this case Kiplinger, it just says rural hospitals at risk. Hundreds of rural hospitals are facing potential service cuts. It says states most affected, and those include rural areas, rural hospitals in Kansas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Texas, and Mississippi. So it doesn't state that one has actually closed as a result, but it also doesn't state that that's not true. So that ends up being sort of I guess a gray area. It's portrayed as what's a potential inevitability, but it's another reason why the vigil is taking place, and it's something to keep an eye on, because I think there's a difference between even feeling with certainty that it's going to take place, but once it has, I think it hits home in a much different way.
Yeah. So I just, as a just, put in, let me just say the results over the last decade, over 100 rural hospitals have closed in the United States between 2015 and 2024. Prior to this bill,
Right.
over 100 hospitals in rural areas have closed. The reality is that system has been broken already. You know what I mean? Again, I'm not at all validating the cuts to Medicaid at all. I'm just saying that when we look at these kinds of things, we have to kind of look at it in a larger picture, because the direct impact on our folks is real. But just so you know, the threat of that has been real for over a decade. Like this has been going on for a long time. And so what's required is if the government's not going to fund, what are the other solutions? What are the other areas how can this be supplemented? And I think the Vigil, and I think these kinds of things where people are speaking out definitely is going to have an impact. I think, there's going to be other private funding, grants, foundations, consolidation in some cases where, and I think that this is sort of the government's intent is, let's not rely solely on federal government level funding. Let's put the emphasis and the effort on other ways of supporting all of this. And again, whether that's fair or not is not really what we're debating. I, as a member of this community, it's always unfair when anything that we're doing is impacted by a third party decision, right? But I'm saying that this has been going on for a long time, and I haven't seen the closures based on the Medicaid thing. I know it's threatened, but always, the great thing about the American spirit is ingenuity, always in the face of detrimental, or some sort of act or action. We've always created alternative solutions, privatizing our hospitals, doing something different as far as healthcare is concerned. That whole system needs to be overhauled. It needs to be reformed. You know what I'm saying?
In the spirit of, as entrepreneurs and financial professionals, it's a whole different conversation. We talk about, what kind of money mindset that, do people have. I'm reading a fascinating book right now, which it came out in 2020. It's been on my list, and it's by Morgan Housel. It's called The Psychology of Money. And
I have it.
Yeah. And we talked about, what is your money language, so to speak? Are you a spender, saver? It goes deeper than that. And it talks about just your psychological connection to money. And I'm saying all that to say that people have, in some cases, a very bad connotation with wealth. I've also heard it said that money is currency. So it's electricity, and it attracts, it just exposes who you are. If you're a good person with the best intentions, there's nothing wrong with making more money. And for those that are sitting on a bit of it, then join the Vigil, this and any other, because it takes nerve, guts, action, and dollars to make a change. And it is easier to do that when we don't just rely on elected officials as well. So, I think that we can probably, unless it's something else that you want to cover, move on to the other aspect other than Medicaid. But go ahead.
I love this conversation. And again, just looking at, the biggest impact to our health system prior to these Medicaid cuts, it was the pandemic. The pandemic forced, right? By the way, the net from 2010 to 2023, more hospitals closed than opened, with a net reduction of 108 hospitals. Meaning that in the last 13, 14 years or so, we've lost hospital care services because from a financial perspective, they can't make them be viable, solvent entities. That's a freaking problem.
Let me ask you this. No, go ahead. I'll ask you after.
At the same time, think about how many things we've relied on the federal government to bail out. Like, how many things are we going to require the federal government to continue to bail out? Bail out the banks, bail out the auto industry. Of all things that the government should be supporting, it should be healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it doesn't, and that the health insurance industry has such a strong lobbying capability.
And a chokehold.
Yeah, that has,
which
to me, that's the biggest problem.
So then let me ask you this then.
Nurses can't get, hospitals can't get paid.
And what is your thought then? You're the only one here that can answer it because I'm asking about your opinion, but I'm asking it to anyone within the sound of my voice. What say you about universal health care, then, where the government pays, the federal government provides health insurance or services for its citizens, just at a basic level? Now, I'm going to answer that question as well too. I think that the whole, and we're not here necessarily talking about citizenship and ICE and raids and all that kind of stuff, because that's been handled the same way the cuts are going to affect the special needs and caregiving community, which is like, you've got a cut on your arm, let's just chop your arm off. I'm saying that to say that one thing affects the other. If you have a tighter rein and a empathetic and honest and legal manner in which you control immigration, and not just immigration, but citizenship, then how bad of an idea is it then to provide basic, decent health care, not that different from what they do in Canada, for those that are honest to goodness citizens of one's nation? How much worse is that?
Let me answer that with asking you a question. And how does it get paid for?
I guess the only way that happens is now, and I guess that's what the question then comes about to other people. How do we feel about taxes being raised in order to do that? And then not just raising them for everyone, you raise them, but they're raised in accordance with what one makes, not as an assault upon the wealthy, but those who have more give more because it's giving back to society, not penalizing someone for being wealthy. I don't know of any other answer besides that.
Yeah. But I will say that again, the folks on the higher end of the tax code, while every break represents a smaller and smaller percentage that gets higher, from an actual dollar perspective, the wealthy pay a lot in taxes dollar wise. Percentage wise, it's a little
more
bit different.
Dollar wise, less percentage wise. Yes.
Yeah. Right. So what do you do? Increase their percentage? They're already paying more in dollars. So now you want to have them pay more in dollars. You know what I'm saying? Again, I don't know if
there's a way around it, especially if it's just for that.
Well, I will say this. If you read reports of what's happening in Canada right now, Canadians are leaving Canada to come to the US because our health system is better than Canada, and Canada has a universal health system. Their taxes are 56%, or they're outrageous. The biggest thing they used to talk about was they had universal health care. And now they're saying that it takes months and months and months to be seen by a professional in Canada. The healthcare system is falling apart at a universal healthcare. I will say this, in Israel, not to talk about Israel again, but they have universal healthcare. They also only have 10 million people, right? Or 15 million people in the country. So it's a very small population. We've got 350 million people in the US. Universal healthcare, because Shawn, what you bring up is a really good thing. And this is the challenge, right? We all feel like we're impacted by certain things that impact us naturally, right? But the reality is, you're talking about universal healthcare being provided for everybody who's here. Well, that goes back now to the immigration question. So where we had open borders and people were flooding in, and born here, some people will come here pregnant, have their child born here, so the child could be a citizen. Well, if you're providing universal health care, you've got to somehow put a cap on something, or we're not going to be able to pay for it. It will be an ongoing, cycle of expenditure. So now let's talk
too. Yeah. That's a good point.
If you talk about immigration, and you're like,
what's interesting is for us to even the fact that maybe it's because, again, I try to stay informed, but not consume, but not gluttonous in my consumption.
Yeah.
But I've never heard anybody even talk about that. Like the things that people just not even disagree upon, but just even having a conversation. So why don't we do? I never hear anybody doing that. You either hear we need to provide asylum to people, we need to keep the borders open. These are human beings. Let everyone in here and let them work their way towards getting citizenship. Or the other extreme is cut them off at the border, separate families, throw them out if they're not legal. Let's go raid restaurants and whatever have you, even though they're paying taxes and they work as well. And it's one extreme or the other. And that's part of our problem, is that there's no conversation in the middle, which is, hey, why don't we raise taxes in certain areas in accordance with income specifically for that, so that we then have universal health care? And then what we do is we put a cap on it as well, because being bigger than Canada without a cap on it, one, you can't take care, you can't provide for everyone, and then you will have a situation having a larger population where people will need critical care and be on a month-long waiting list. There's got to be a limitation of some kind. There's got to be some middle ground, and I don't know what makes it so difficult to do
This
that,
is
other
the
than
challenge with running a large country.
yeah,
With people who have opinions on both sides. This is the
mhm,
challenge. The challenge is you're not just, while it feels like, oh, you're cutting Medicaid for all the needy people, it's not done in a vacuum. It's done relative to the totality of all the other things that are going on. And by the
mhm.
way, I'm happy to jump into a conversation about immigration. I think that the way that the administration is doing this is absolutely vile, and with the intent initially of eliminating those who have come here legally to do damage and wreak havoc on
Now
the
here's the
citizens.
thing too. This is a totally different sidebar. Now, I don't engage much with CNN, MSNBC, or Fox. Fox, like, not at all. CNN, like, close second, maybe avoid it just as much. So it could be possible that this is the case, and I just don't know. But if there were families who are immigrants that are not brown, that are being rounded up just as much, I think that some of that would bleed onto social media, because I see a lot of stuff on social media that I'm not necessarily looking for. So I tend to believe that most of the families that they're rounding up are brown immigrations that are brown in color, because they're still looking at skin color. Because you have the gentleman, I don't even remember his name, that's the border czar, says that, um, it's really okay to profile and stop someone for suspicion of being illegal based solely on their appearance. Now, if you're at a Home Depot, people are there looking for work. You go to an area where there's migrant farm workers and people are picking food in a field. That's kind of 1 and 1 is 2. That's just basic math. I don't necessarily know that that's profiling. But when you stop people that are citizens and they're dressed for work, like an attorney in Orange County who was coming from a funeral and is not just an attorney, but a founding partner of the firm that she belongs to. She's in the park just trying to clear her head after coming from a funeral, and she gets snatched up. I got into a conversation the other day with a neighbor where I shared that with him, and I said, the story said that she told people in Spanish, you don't have to give any information, and she's letting them know what their legal rights are, and she was eventually let go. His justification was she encouraged them not to cooperate. She was, that's why they got picked up, and that's why she was arrested, but she was eventually let go. Well, then the question that's begged is, why was she picked up at all? So anyway, going back to the whole thing, if just like you said, it's such vile treatment that the other thing that it does is it's not just inhumane, and it's not just about conservative versus liberal, but what happens is we then end up avoiding the fact that there really is an issue that needs to be addressed. And the problem isn't that the issue is being addressed. The problem is the manner in which the issue is being addressed. And the issue is, in fact, immigration. Yes, it is a problem, but you can't just treat people like roaches. Just like these cuts need to take place, but how do you go about doing that? You don't just cut off an arm because there's a cut.
Well, and
So
again, I'm going to go back to the intent, which is The intent is to reduce the federal funding and push as much as possible down into the states, right?
Right.
So it's cutting federal, but it's not cutting off an arm because you have a cut. It's don't come to the surgeon when you have a cut on your arm.
Right.
Go to the guys that handle that handle the cuts. Don't go to a surgeon
Right.
for that. It doesn't even make any sense, right?
Right.
That's
right.
And again, that's kind of the overall sense, anyways. And I think all of us as Americans, unless we want to see our taxes increase, we all feel that, we want the money that we're giving the government in taxes to go to the things that really generally support our effort, our roads, our services, our protection, all of those things that give us, the peace, that we're entitled to by the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence, right?
Right.
All the rights that we're intended to have and support. The question comes in, where you look at, well, does that spending in this particular area does it do that? Does it solve that the question that we're all trying to figure out? And that has an impact. You let people in, they become citizens. It's gonna have an impact on anything that impacts. Listen, all of this goes back to same-sex marriages, where a lot of the argument around it was, I want my same-sex spouse to have the same rights as any other spouse. Right? Entitlement to my estate, entitlement to my healthcare, entitlement to all of that stuff, right? That was not just about, whether it's okay or not to have a same-sex relationship. It's, what does that designation entitle my spouse to that they didn't have that they weren't entitled to before? Same thing here. If you have immigration and you make it easy to get citizenship here in the U.S., what rights do you now have that's equal to everybody else who has done it, who has been born here naturally, right? What are you now entitled to that you weren't before? And that's always the question, because the entitlement payments, Social Security, Medicaid, all that stuff, it comes from somewhere. Right now, it comes from taxes. And I would say every Republican administration, their goal was always to not raise taxes where possible and to cut spending as much as possible, right? And that has been consistent for the last 40 years. And the Democratic position is, we want the government to take care of everybody, provide for everybody, and we'll figure out a way to pay for it. Unfortunately, the servicing of the debt that has created is making it almost impossible for us to have a solvent government. And that's the challenge. So how do you maintain solvency and serve as many people as you possibly can? Some segments of the population are going to get less preference in certain areas. Again, who determines that? That's the biggest challenge that our elected officials have, which is why it's so important for people to get out and vote. Only 30% or 32% of our population that's eligible to vote actually goes to the polls, right? That doesn't make any sense. We're a free country, for crying out loud.
I think that's probably going to change this year, but that's a perfect segue, because the question is now, then how do we explain? You talked about, taxes not being raised in a certain area, and so then how do we explain? I know we spent a lot of time.
By the way, I know where you're going, but let me just say this.
Yeah,
we talked about California having a lot more services, right, for California citizens. California has the highest taxes versus all the other states. So we do pay for it in California.
That's a good point that you just made, because people use that as an excuse to complain about it and bash the state also. But
we have all these services. It pays for the services.
They're not high just for it. And that brings about a good point, which is, everything costs. Every action has a reaction. And then, so it's like, would you rather be in other states that have lower taxes but don't have services? No, there's a reason for that. But then it goes back to the other thing too. So then what is the justification for as is emblematic of this bill, for the taxes being, and I know we talked about percentage versus actual numbers, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
those that are going to benefit from the bill are those who have the most. And what about that and that balance? Let's just talk about that portion of it.
Yeah. So
and I say that to say, again, going back to what I said before, which is, the most valuable things on the planet are people, time, and money. And money is only as valuable as it is because the first two are more important. So I'm all about making more money, especially not only making it legally. I mean, we're in financial services, we're entrepreneurs, not only about making it legally, but if it's tied to the value that you add to others. Yes. But so I'm looking to have my taxes raised because I make more. That's the goal. That's the intention. That's the hope. But then at the same time, how do we explain, and why is it then that the bill and so many others, especially of the administration, I don't know, it just seems like the more you make, the less you're squeezed.
Well, again, I'm not a CPA and I'm not an accountant. So I'm going to say this. The intent was to supplement some of that by providing other things that are beneficial to the general public. For example, the service workers who have their tips taxed, capping taxes on overtime. It's amazing. People will say anybody who works overtime or get a bonus, they're blown away by the fact that the additional time that they spent, if you look at it relative to their regular hours, they're taxed more on that overtime just because of the way the tax rules are, right? Mm-hmm. If I get a bonus at the end of the year, the way the tax code is calculated, it looks like
you're talking about bonus as a W-2 individual or 1099?
Yes, sure. But it pays taxes on there directly out of there.
Right.
Yeah.
On a W-2, an employee. Right.
It's as if I got a 13th month of payment. And so because it's only tax code's only based on 12, that 13th month is going to get a high tax impact, right? So you get this bonus and you're all happy. And then you're like, wait a minute, I paid more in taxes on my bonus check than I even paid on my regular monthly check, right? Or I paid more on my overtime. I just had this conversation yesterday with a catering company that hires employees to come and work on catering events, and they have to budget there's a certain amount of hours, and they don't like it when their clients keep their people in overtime not because that they have to pay overtime, but because they know every time they pay overtime, the person is going to go back and go, hey, I thought I was getting overtime. And you paid more in taxes. So reducing the taxes on tips and overtime is a benefit to the majority of the working class. I don't know if this is going to hold, but the $1,000, child account that Trump is suggesting. So every child starts with some money in some account that you can contribute to, like a Roth or like a 529 plan. It's like one of those things that the government is trying to say, yes, I know you're having children and it's a burden, blah, blah, blah. Here's $1,000 account set up for them that you can contribute to if you want. If not, they at least start with $1,000. Like they're trying to put things in place that help the average American worker. And again, that may just be rhetoric. I'm just saying that I know that there's an attempt to try to equalize it to some degree. If you look at the largest employers in the country, taking the states out of it, because most of the time, the state is generally the largest employer in the state, if that makes sense, right? The California state government is the largest employer in California of any employees, right? So taking the states themselves out of that equation, the largest employers in those states, and you can look them up, which ones they are: Walmart, Apple, Amazon, each one of those states. And you think about how much those, now, by the way, if I look at Berkshire Hathaway and the Walton family and, Tim Cook and Jeff Bezos, you look how much money those guys make, those are also the largest employers in the country that come out of those. So they're generating tax income for all of their employees. If again, this is sort of the Atlas Shrugged idea. If you take the titans of industry and you put an undue burden on them, they're just go away, and then what? What's the impact on the rest of the economy when that happens? Again, it's futuristic and it's far fetched. They're not going to go away. But I would probably tell you that if you ask that, all of those guys, Bezos and Warren Buffett, have all said we're happy to pay more in taxes. We're happy to pay more in taxes. We should pay more in taxes. This system just hasn't done all that. So, anyways, I'm not sure what the answer is. I know that the intent is don't tax wealthy, because they're the titans of industry, and they're creating opportunity and more revenue for.
And you made a good point, because I've heard them say that you mentioned, Buffett and Bezos, and so I'm like, so why don't they just
here's the answer to that question. Let's go to them to supplement what's being cut in Medicaid. Like if
that's what I was talking about before, in terms of you standing up and those that have more, you help people to feed themselves. Do it in a way that helps people to feed themselves. It doesn't have to be in a manner that teaches people how to catch more fish, not to necessarily give them more fish. And the older I get, this is why age is wisdom, I find that I answer my own questions as I ask them out loud. I already know why that doesn't take place. Is because there's enough people that have money and have influence that aren't in office, that are closer to pulling puppet strings, that make enough donations that they get to push their agenda, which is, look, I get you in, you don't raise our taxes.
Yeah, listen.
Part of the answer anyway.
Maybe. But I would say, going back, like, where do we appeal? Where do we appeal to supplement what the federal government is cutting? Well, we give these wealthy folks benefits for creating foundations and charities, right? They have billions of dollars in their foundations, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Berkshire Hathaway, like these guys all have tons. Why don't we do something in healthcare that actually gets that money from these foundations? And again, that may or may not be the answer, but that money is sitting there to be given to support things that help the general population. Health is definitely one of those things. As we're getting older and requiring more services as we age, that's one avenue. I guess the point is that the federal government says, be ingenious, Americans. You've done it since the existence of this country, 250 years. There's other ways to get what you want without having a handout from the federal government.
Listen, right? I was just going to say, and I don't know that I agree with this exact thought, but the idea of this is to promote the idea of thinking out. This is more of an idea to promote thinking outside the box, not the thought itself. When I was on that call, there was a fellow that said, let me ask something. This might seem out there. It is irrefutable that the changes to the bill are going to not only affect some people in some ways, in a variety of ways, but in one certain way, it's going to affect some people to the point of death. Would you not agree? And theoretically, that's not crazy. So the thought was, how crazy is it to not either sue the government or bring criminal charges against the government for murder? And the person said, the idea isn't about convicting the government of murder, but simply bringing up the charges to give people something to think about. I just feel like we have to get creative. That's what this person said. And I thought, you know what? Whether you agree with that thought or not, thinking outside the box to propose a thought, whether it's that or what you just said, that's the whole reason for something like the Vigil, and the idea that you stand up and say, what about this idea? You're going to come up with things that, may or may not stick. If you come up with some things that are completely outlandish and there's no way that it's going to work, maybe no way that it should, depending on how crazy the idea is, it takes thoughts like that sometimes to get to one that is logical and does make sense and seems like it was sitting right under your nose the whole time too.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of suing the government just in general because
What kind of precedent does that set?
You can sue them for war. You're defending yourself and you're going to war and people are dying. So then you're suing them for murder for people, in war. Like that to me, that's a little bit extreme. However, sometimes you need a paradigm shift. You need somebody on the outlier to be able to move things in a particular direction. So I do think that there are solutions that we haven't thought of yet. And I think that the more vocal we are, but again, I'm going to go back to the idea that in California, we citizens pay higher taxes relative to the other states, and we get better services. So we're an example of what people love and hate about a democratically elected government is we don't like to pay, but we like the services. So how do you balance it out? The solution really is somewhere in between. It's something of both, right?
Yeah.
We in the special needs community, I have clients that I'm talking to right now who have an adult son on the autism spectrum. It's 29 years old, and his older daughter lives in another state. And when they pass, they're insisting that their daughter move to California so he continues to get the best services that he can in any other state, right? Because they will move out of California, and they make a good living, and they pay a lot. They pay at the highest range of taxes, but they also that takes care of their adult child who is going to need support and services for the rest of his life, even after they've passed on. So by the way, the fact that the federal government is making these cuts and pushing down the states, in California, we're very, very, for those in other states that aren't, that's where they got to go to the polls and vote to get the kinds of services and support that they need. And for those states that don't charge state income tax and get their taxes from some other form, the reality is the balance is taxes, support, services. That's just it. The more folks that are diagnosed with with something that puts them into the special needs category, and with an aging population that also becomes part of the special needs community as well.
Yeah,
we have to be advocates, and we have.
And nothing is free.
Nothing is free, and we've got to just find a solution, and not just say, "Well, if the federal government's not going to pay for it, I guess we're screwed." Because that's not the solution. The solution is, okay, if the federal government's not paying for it, how can we get the services paid for? Where do we go? Let's privatize some things. Let's go to these foundations. Let's find some other solution that makes more sense, right? And by the way, with artificial intelligence, the answer's out there, right? Maybe there's some solutions that can be done, right? So I love having these kinds of conversations because it's not really about the areas that we are in disagreement. It's about coming together and finding the areas where we can agree on and find out. It's not positional. It's solution driven. Let's be solution driven. Let's find an answer to these things, as opposed to just wringing our hands and going, "Oh, the sky is falling." As I said to you before, like I never wanted to have this conversation before the thing was passed because there was so much noise out there that until it was passed, there was nothing concrete to talk about. Now that it's passed and it's concrete, okay, now we can deal with the fallout. And I will tell you this too, Shawn, and I still think we should do this. But we have a friend of the program and personal friend as well, who is an advocate, an IEP lawyer, who spends a lot of time. She's also on the right, not correct, on the right side of the political aisle, who's just spent a week in DC for advocating for the special needs community. And she has a very, very specific opinion about these cuts and about these things, and we need to have her on the program. And I think we should still do that now that you and I have had this discussion openly here, and hopefully people are interested in a discussion where we've got somebody on the left and somebody on the right, both solution driven, that want to kind of come to an agreement. And I think it'll be more beneficial than vitriolic, honestly.
I agree. That's a conversation I'm open to you and I having.
Yeah.
Most definitely. I think this whole thing has a lot of layers to it. So my wheels have been turning to in terms of other things. Like we're going to follow it with a separate episode altogether that talks about what people can do individually, because it complaining really is easy. It doesn't take any effort.
That's true.
Complaining is easy, but solutions take effort.
Listen, I sit on the board of two nonprofits that serve the special needs community in different ways. And the money that pays for the services that those two provide come from varying sources. There's some government support through regional centers. Primarily it's private donations and it's corporate donations, right? It's corporate participation, it's private foundations, it's private individuals that pay for the services that serve the community. So nonprofits have found a way to not be reliant. By the way, the only thing that they really get from the government is that their donors get a tax write-off for contributing to charity, right? They qualify, excuse me, as a 501c3, and they qualify for a donation being tax deductible. That's the only true government, except for those that get their money from the regional center for specific programs. That's really the only impact that government has on those folks. Otherwise, they're going to foundations and individuals and corporations for finances to serve the community. We're talking about doing this on a larger scale. It's not unheard of. It's been going on forever here. It's something that can be done. It has to be done on a different scale.
Yeah. And the opportunity to take part in something like that, again, is the Protect Medicaid Vigil, which is taking place starting tomorrow. You can register. It's on the screen right now at protectmedicaidvigil.com. You can do nothing and be part of the problem, so to speak, because a decision to do nothing is still a decision. Or you can do something and speak up. Your story has more value than you think. You have more value than you think. And there are answers out there waiting to be discovered that will not, unless we actually step forth and share our voices. And at the site, there's a registration form. It's actually going to be taking place in person and virtual at the mall in Washington, D.C. I want to encourage everyone to take part in that. I myself have already registered, and I hope that you will do the same. We will be continuing to promote that. We say this each time we do the show, and I think this is no exception, especially even compared to part one that we did. This hour here is the shortest one I have ever experienced doing this show in 5 years.
It goes fast. Yeah, when you're engaged,
it really
fast, right? It's really great.
Yeah, most definitely. Definitely.
And there's good conversations to have, and we should all be having them, and find a solution. And I don't know what the answer is, I don't know what the solution is, but at least having a discussion can hopefully promote some thinking.
Right. And that's what it's about. Ask more questions, make less statements. And, the barbershop, the beauty salon, and the water cooler is a place where so much energy gets wasted on opinion. I remember Kobe Bryant, one of the most competitive human beings that has ever lived on the planet, when they asked him something about being regarded as the greatest of all time, he said, I don't engage in that. And he was like, and the person interviewing him was like, why not? He goes, I don't engage in, things that I don't have a chance at winning. If you don't believe that I'm the greatest, like, I'm not going to change your mind. Right?
It's true.
We're not here to change minds. Establish whether or not a mind can be changed. That's what, don't have a conversation just for the purpose of changing someone's mind. And if you accept that the mind can't be changed, then accept that and move on.
Yeah. And I'll also say on top of that, Kobe probably put in more hours, more dedication, had a bigger drive than so many others in his league. That wasn't a question in his mind. So he didn't sit back and accept that he was the greatest and did nothing. He didn't accept what was handed down to him. He didn't accept when the league would not allow them to draft Chris Paul, because they didn't want to create a dynasty. He didn't accept. He didn't just sit back and go, well, I guess we're screwed. He went, no, work harder, get it done, have the attitude, infuse your teammates, and make stuff happen. That's what we need to do. We need to make stuff happen. And if we can't, just don't sit there and accept what's been handed down to us as a death sentence. No, we need to figure out what's the solution. How can I be a part of it? And let's go make some change happen.
Yeah, most definitely. And I know what you meant. You said draft Chris Paul, but I know what you meant. You meant sign him because he was. Yeah. but you know, being resourceful is something that is so greatly underestimated. Well, we're at that point in that time. Go ahead. I will follow you.
I just say, at the end of every show, every episode, I always say empathy and love is more important now than almost ever. And I still believe that. And I empathize. I empathize with those in our community that are feeling the impact, and also the idea that this is not the end. This is the beginning of the next step. That's all. Empathy, and I empathize with, anyways, just having empathy for other people. You never know what their situation is. You don't know how they're personally impacted by things that are going on. So have some empathy, and also see the world through the lenses of love. It makes the world a much better place. Again, Shawn and I can have this conversation where we have disagreement, but because we truly love each other as individuals and as men, it makes these conversations easy to have because it comes from the place of love, not from any other place. With that, I'll throw it over to you, Shawn, to close us out.
Most definitely. I want to thank, I don't even know if we mentioned it in the previous episode, thank our friends at Billy Footwear. If you click on the link, which will be in the show notes, you will get a discount on the final price. That includes any sale price that they may have. Want to encourage you to feel free to take advantage of the free registration for our men's group, which is known as the Den. We meet bi-weekly on Zoom, and that is a group that is for dads and or men who may be dads or caregivers to those with disabilities or special needs, the aged, doesn't matter who. And again, protect Medicaid Vigil. That will be in the show notes as well. It starts tomorrow. And just, again, to each and everyone within the sound of my voice, we thank you so much for supporting the show. And if you are mindful that we should be more childlike, less childish, questions are more valuable than statements. Empathy takes work, but it is as challenging as it is worth it. If you're watching this, we love you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.